welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague, who would never use the word never-ending, is Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
For people who are unaware of our reference, the Prime Minister of this here United Kingdom was sent out a tweet using, and I quote, "There won't be another referendum, it would be a never-endum." This isn't. Here we go. This is a referendum and not a never-endum. Try and say something about that, Neil, without swearing. Go.
I didn't realise that. I thought the thick of it was satirical comedy. I didn't realise it was seen as how politics should be delivered. I mean, I'm just literally just waiting for someone to describe someone else as the Omni Shambles, and then the circle will be complete.
I think it's a great satirical comedy in the UK. We recommend it for the people in the States. If you've watched new Doctor Who, that guy before he was Doctor Who swore a lot.
By the way, did you know he was Peter Capaldi was in World War Z?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Did you know he was a doctor at the World Health Organization?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So he was Doctor Who.
He was Doctor at the Who. Yes, indeed he was. Indeed he was. Very good film. Although I'm not convinced zombies can run. Yeah. But we'll get onto that another time.
But they were careful not to use the word zombies, though, weren't they?
Yeah, they were dead people who came back to life and ran. It's a zombie. Like you can dictionary definition me all you want, but they were zombies.
The thing I also just this last thing as we digress. My biggest issue is about The Walking Dead. It's not that it could happen because we all know the zombie apocalypse is coming. Tin hat on and all that. The two issues I have, three issues. One, who's cutting their hair? Who's taking the time out to go to Bob's? Two, who's cutting the grass?
Okay.
And three, where are they getting their ammunition from?
My question on this, and I watched some of The Walking Dead, and yeah, the ammunition one is a classic. My one is like, how many series can you do of the same thing? Which is walk around Atlanta, shooting zombies, meet up with bad guy, get captured, find way to escape, kill more zombies, kill off one of major characters in some kind of zombie accident.
We're going to criticise, characters being killed off in accident by someone who watches Game of Thrones, yes?
That's not by accident. That's on purpose, right? That the only thing we know for certain in a George R.R. Martin related show is someone's going to die pretty soon.
I did see a picture on Facebook. Now you'll have to forgive me. It said there's a picture of Jon Snow.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jon Snow got his life back. Is it Arya Stark?
Yeah.
Got her eyes back. And then there was a picture of some fella who was defenestrated. Yeah, it went, "You hang in there, fella."
Do you know why?
Yes, because he had his...
Someone lost his wang. Yeah. Ramsay Bolton took his wang and ate it, maybe.
He ate it?
It was insinuated that he ate it. He is the most evil character of all the Game of Thrones. I think he overtakes Joffrey in evil man.
From what I know, Joffrey isn't evil. He's just a horrible little...
Oh no, he was evil as well. He was. I've rewatched Kate watching him from the start, so I've rewatched him. Oh no, he was evil as well as horrible.
Also in Batman.
He was in Batman, Don. He was in Batman. Not the Ben Affleck Batman. Not the Adam West Batman. Not the Michael Keaton Batman. Not the Val Kilmer Batman. But the Christian Bale Batman. And you'll notice that I didn't mention the George Clooney one because that didn't exist.
It didn't happen. Maybe the good people of Westeros and Winter Landing, whatever it's called, would have been better served. Winterfell, if Batman hadn't saved him.
Maybe Christian Bale should just took him out.
Yeah,
it's a good call.
You'll thank me.
You'll get a proper voice, and then we'll all be happy. Like.
Exactly.
Don't that is a major digression, but let's get on with the show. 2 big interviews this week. NFL heavy. First of all, one of our favourite college analysts and purveyor of PhillyEagles.com, Mr. Fran Duffy. He's going to talk us through Carson Wentz, Josh Doxson, and others. Then we've got NFL fantasy producer of Fantasy Live and writer, Mr. Alex Gellar, who's jumped up the Maine's favourite rankings with his recent love for Liverpool Football Club. So we'll discuss tomorrow's. We're recording this on Tuesday, early due to the fact I'll be watching Liverpool in a fetal position playing Basel. Do you remember when it was Basel, by the way?
I remember when it was Basel.
Okay, not just
me. And people were mocked for saying Basel.
Yeah,
or Basel.
But much like many places, it became German. Bit of political humour there. And we'll talk to him also about Aaron Rodgers and what he thinks of the new thin Eddie Lacy. Thinner or thin?
Thinner.
You're not thin, is he? Still?
No, he's still a well-built unit. Yeah.
He's just not fat.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, Dutton, that's enough talking from me and you. Let's get Fran on the line to talk about your team and my team, and where we did well with our first round picks.
Indeed.
And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts, it's a privilege to welcome back Fran Duffy. Fran works for PhillyEagles.com, host of Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, and also does the College Draft pod with Ross Tucker. Fran, how are we today?
I'm doing excellent, guys. I appreciate it again, you guys having me on.
No worries. Let's get straight onto it. You work for PhillyEagles.com. You do a podcast for them. You do college draft with Ross Tucker. We've got to talk about Carson Wentz. And my question is, we know Sam, Mr. Bradford's back in, as Dalton would call him Mr. Bradford because he's not speaking to him anymore. Is back in the fold. But if due to injury or whatever, Carson Wentz had to play this season, how do you think he would do?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, really, the thing that we've seen from Doug Peterson over the last couple of years, since he's been the offensive coordinator in Kansas City, was he showed a great ability to adapt to circumstances. You know, when they had Jamal Charles, they ran the ball a certain way, and then when they lost Jamal Charles and had to check down to a couple different options in the run game, they changed the way that they played football and the way that they game planned for opponents. I would imagine that if it came to it and due to injuries, and I would imagine that if Sam Bradford were to get hurt, that it would be Chase Daniel that would step in and get starts for this football team this year ahead of Carson Wentz. But if it did come down to it and you got down to your third-string quarterback and it was Carson Wentz, I would imagine that they would approach it in a way much like we've seen in the past with teams that have handled rookie quarterbacks starting, and that's a way to protect them. You want to try and run the football. You want to try and control the clock and really not take the ball out of his hands, but just allow him to get accustomed to the speed of the game, and especially coming from the FCS level, that's the big thing for Carson Wentz, is that he's going to have to just get accustomed to the speed of the NFL game. Everything that he has shown during his time at North Dakota State, he mastered that offense. He mastered that game plan week in, week out. Show the ability to break down defenses and know what their strengths and what their weaknesses are, know what their tendencies were. Very advanced from that respect for a college prospect, but the speed of the game is something completely different, and all these players are going to have to get accustomed to that, but Carson Wentz most of all.
So, I mean, my question on that front is, in the perfect Philadelphia Eagles scenario, when does Wentz start?
That's a good question. I would imagine that it would be next year. It would be 2017. But look, Sam Bradford's the quarterback right now. We have 16, 12. We'll have a 20-game sample, I guess, here moving forward into this fall, and we'll see how it all plays out. Obviously, a lot of it depends on how Carson Wentz develops and how he comes along during practice and in the meeting room, and how he looks if he does ever get any snaps. And that'll be very, very intriguing to see. The Eagles released Bethel Thompson, who was the fourth quarterback on the roster this morning. How that then carries into training camp. Will there only be 3 quarterbacks on the roster? I think that's very interesting to watch moving forward, because teams typically like to have 4 quarterbacks. You don't want to run your quarterbacks into the ground. If you only have 3, I would expect that would mean that Carson Wentz is going to get a ton of reps, and those reps are going to be pivotal for him in his development in the preseason games. And that's going to make the end of these preseason games for the Eagles this summer very, very fun to watch, just to see how he progresses from week 1 to week 4.
So if Wentz is, in an ideal world, is not going to be seen till 2017 at the earliest, which, as I say, in an ideal world would be nice, which of the Eagles' rookies should we expect to make an impact this season from what you've seen of them in college and what you know of them?
I think that Isaac Seumalo, who's not here right now just because of how how Oregon State University operates in terms of their trimesters academically, but I think he's got the best shot to come in and compete for a starting job right away. You look at the left guard spot. You have Alan Barber, who's the starter right now, and Doug Peterson went on the record today and said that it was his job to lose. But you've got Alan Barber, you've got Steven Wisniewski, who was signed late in the free agency process, who can play guard and also play center. You've got another young guy in Malcolm Bunch. It'll be a very interesting competition there for that left guard spot. Obviously, a guy like Matt Tobin, Andrew Gardner in the mix as well. So it'll be a really good training camp battle for that guard spot. But Seumalo is a guy and they targeted him as a potential player that could start from day one inside. So that's one option. I like the two defensive backs that they drafted late, guys. Blake Countess from Auburn played all three positions for the Tigers this past year, played corner, played nickel, played safety, and also Jalen Mills, who was great value there in round 7, fell because of some alleged off-the-field issues, but a guy that's got good size, he's a good athlete, played corner early in his career, then shifted to safety, played mostly in the slot this past season when he was healthy, missed the first action of his career. He had started every single game that he played in during his time at LSU, and then broke his leg late in training camp last summer. So missed the first 6-7 games of the season, came back and was entrenched in the role as the slot corner for them. But a guy that's got great positional versatility. I think both of those DBs, I mentioned the offensive line battle. I'm really, really excited about the battle in the secondary this summer with lots of young players and a good mix of some veterans as well that have experience in the scheme.
See, the one of the biggest teaching points from what you just said, Fran, is I thought his name was Stefan Wisniewski. So I have learned something today.
So if we move on to another team in the NFC East, when we spoke prior to the draft to Eric Galco, who in an article on Perfect what he would do if he was a GM, he picked Josh Doxson to go to Washington. I was ecstatic with this, but thought it won't ever happen. It has happened. I've seen him at TCU. I thought he was excellent. What do you think he will bring to the table year one for Washington?
Well, it was a great fit, and because you had two receivers there, and Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon, who both turned 30 this year and are both entering contract seasons. So the need for youth at the position was great, especially someone that can play on the outside after adding Jamison Crowder in the slot a year ago. Doxson can bring that, and more so than anybody else on the roster right now, he brings the ability to win in those contested catch situations. Garçon is great after the catch. We know the vertical threat that Deshaun Jackson can be. They released Andre Roberts this morning, but Jamison Crowder can step in and be a factor in the slot. But can anybody be that contested catch, back shoulder, red zone threat? Josh Doxson can do that from day one, and I think in year 2, you might see some similarity. Some of the things that Jay Gruden did in Cincinnati with a guy like A.J. Green, could he be that kind of player for Jay Gruden? That is very, very interesting to me, a question moving forward with the Washington Redskins.
Don't get me too excited here, Fran. You've got me. So I suppose the question is this perfect for Kirk Cousins now? We know that in the red zone he wants to look for Jordan Reed. So are we just adding another weapon to that red zone threat?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't believe I didn't even mention Jordan Reed. And then also, too, Chris Thompson, who was a guy that I really liked coming out of college. Obviously, he had a ton of injuries, had some injuries as well in the NFL level, but a dynamic running back out of the backfield, can be a threat as a receiver. And he showed that in Week 16. He caught a touchdown pass against the Eagles. A very, very interesting player out of the backfield. So when you factor in the litany of weapons the Redskins have at their disposal, Kirk Cousins has to be feeling pretty good. Now you have to repeat that success that he had a year ago, and that'll be the big thing for him. Can he consistently come back and put up those kinds of numbers, be that efficient in that offensive system once again?
See, obviously mentioning the running backs there with Chris Thompson, are you surprised that for all intents and purposes, for the lead back in Washington, they seem to be hitching the wagon to Matt Jones? And are you surprised that maybe they haven't brought in a more established veteran to push him?
When they let go of Alfred Morris, I thought, all right, maybe they'd bring in somebody. And look, there's a lot of offseason left. They still might, with a guy like Arian Foster still out there. That's still very much in the cards, I would imagine. But it doesn't surprise me at all that they're looking at Matt Jones as the feature back. I mean, they spent a third-round pick on him a year ago. and took him earlier than a lot of people thought. I wasn't against the pick because I liked what I saw from Matt Jones on tape during his time in Florida. So when I saw them take him in the third round, I said, all right, this is an opportunity for him to really prove himself, and he's going to be given the opportunity to earn that feature back role. Had some issues with protecting the football this year, but a guy that can really hit it up between the tackles, decisive, no-nonsense runner, really physical after contact, and a really interesting player, also a factor in the screen game as well. So he's another guy that, to me, it doesn't surprise me at all that Jay Gruden can look at him as a feature-type back in that offense.
If we move over to everybody's favourite team to hate, the Dallas Cowboys, they obviously got Ezekiel Elliott in, but they've got what everyone describes as this unbelievable offensive line that helped Darren McFadden get to 1,000 yards, that obviously had DeMarco Murray the year before being a lead rusher. Was it surprising that they went with Ezekiel Elliott when they really needed someone either on the defensive line or especially in defensive back?
I was a little surprised. Look, there had been a lot of talk about Ezekiel Elliott to the Cowboys, but there was a lot of smoke, too, that the Cowboys were in love with Jalen Ramsey. And when Ramsey fell to them at 4, I thought he would be the pick. But, that would have been my plan A. But honestly, if I would have taken a second guess, it would have been Elliott. Look, he's going to be a very tough guy to handle behind that offensive line. And obviously they've got a lot of beef up front. They put a lot of assets into that position group, with guys like Tyron Smith, and they got a steal in Lyle Collins last year. We've seen what Travis Frederick can do, and Zach Martin as well. It's a very, very accomplished group up front. And now when you take a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, who is an extremely skilled runner, a very instinctive player with the ball in his hands, very well-rounded, can beat you to the corner, but also can hit it up inside, can be a 3-down back as well. I think that spells trouble for a lot of the NFC East teams, because he's a guy that has shown that he can carry the load, doesn't have too many carries on his resume, so you would think his body can continue to handle more punishment. Is a good fit for that scheme and for that team.
Is it childish of me? Sorry, is it childish of me then, Fran? As an Eagles fan, to hope that instead of being this great, all world athlete, that he's actually just the second coming of Trent Richardson?
Well, I mean, yeah, you gotta hope for it, but I also try to be true to myself as well. Look, there are times where I look at what teams in the division do, and I scratch my head and I wonder, what was the thought behind that? But I got to call a spade as well. The Elliott pick, look, he's very, very talented. A lot of people were excited about the possibility before the Eagles traded up to 2 of Elliott becoming an Eagle if they had stayed at number 8 or at number 13. He's a very, very talented runner. So seeing him go to Dallas is certainly bittersweet.
In terms of not necessarily a comparison, but in terms of where he stacks against, say, Todd Gurley, is he that kind of talent? Is he better? Is he slightly worse? Where do you rate him?
I think that in terms of physical gifts, Gurley's probably a little bit ahead in terms of, look, his sheer size and his explosive movement downhill. When Gurley sticks his foot in the ground and gets downhill, he's a little bit more impressive there than Elliott. But Elliott's probably a little bit more instinctive in terms of his natural running skill, and he's more well-rounded in terms of his ability to block as well. Gurley wasn't an awful blocker, but Elliott has the ability. There's no question Elliott can step in right now and be a third down back for an NFL offense because of his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, but also to hold up in pass protection. So the two are comparable. I would say physically that Gurley has the advantage, but I would say that Elliott's probably a little bit more well-rounded.
So obviously, we've talked about the three NFC East teams. It'd be unfair if we didn't talk about the Giants. They don't seem that they're not particularly big players on draft day. I mean, I think I read somewhere that Jerry Reese has never traded a pick on draft day. He's never moved up, never moved down. How do you think they did from the players they took, and how much do you think they've improved from what they were last year?
Well, obviously, look, they were one of the big players in free agency this past year. And then looking at the draft, a lot of people were really taken aback by the Eli Apple selection at number 10. Did I rank him as a top 10 player? No, but I can definitely see why they selected him at number 10, because He was one of the most physically gifted corners in this draft class when you factor in his size and his speed and his athletic ability. The question was his ability to play the ball in the air downfield. Can he find the ball late in the down? Once he turns his back to the quarterback, turn and find the ball down the field. That was the question for Eli Apple, but physically, he's got everything you want. And comparably to a guy like Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, who's his new teammate now in New York, has got great size, has got great speed in a straight line, shows the ability to hold up in man coverage. I can remember Eli Apple as a redshirt freshman in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama, holding up so well against Amari Cooper, who obviously was a top 5 pick for the Oakland Raiders and then went on to have a very good NFL start to his NFL career. I think Eli Apple has got outstanding physical tools. Now the question is, can you get the most out of him? Can he develop? Can he improve in some of his weaker spots of his game and fill that potential? I can see why they went that direction. He's a very, very intriguing corner.
So final question from us, Fran. We've talked about the 4 NFC East teams. We'll hopefully have you on before the start of the season, but let's have an outrageously early prediction of where you see the NFC East going in terms of which teams you expect to be at the top at the end.
I'm gonna have to go Eagles number 1 for obvious reasons.
Of course.
But number two, I would say that Dallas. If they can keep Romo healthy, and that has been a big question, and it's going to continue to be a question because honestly, if Ezekiel Elliott, if they give him the ball 20, 30 times a game, it only takes one hit for Tony Romo to be out, and still you have the questions about, all right, well, who is the backup quarterback? There's talks that it could be 5th-round pick Dak Prescott. And are you going to throw a 5th-round pick to the Wolves that way? I think that is a major question mark. But if Romo is able to stay healthy, I would expect them to be battling for that division crown. I would put Washington in at number 3 with the New York Giants in at number 4.
Fantastic.
I can live with that.
Yeah, I can't, but that's not the problem. Fran, thanks a lot for your time, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again, guys.
That was the brilliant Fran Duffy there, talking us through the NFC East and picking the Washington professional football team to come 3rd.
Snyder comes back from his long vacation.
I mean, to be fair, he didn't pick them to come 3rd. He works for PhiladelphiaEagles.com. Ipso facto, they've got to be 1st. So all he's done is really pick Dallas over us. Okay, fair enough. I understand that. I'm not going to take that personally. He's bigged up the red zone offense. Maybe he doesn't like the Washington defense. That's fine.
I mean, you have to think there are easier ways of, resigning from your place of work than going on a podcast with 2, scout idiots and saying, 4-12, we're out of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I was interested, and I think it's something that we'll need to probably talk to Fran about again, is try and get... I'm interested in gauging Chase Daniel's emotions right now. I think he thought he was going to start when he signed, and now he's like 3rd. I know he's got a load of money, and I know he's probably going to count it as Dutton's doing it. He's getting his wallet out. I saw the dust fly up there.
Not my wallet.
But he surely thought he was going to start, and now he's like, didn't I just go through this in Kansas City?
As you know, the best job in the world is backup quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, it is. And in theory, he's 3rd string. So the ironic thing is, if Bradford sucks, everyone's going to call for Wentz, and they're going to bring Daniel in.
Well, it was similar, if you remember, back in the day when Kyle Orton was starting for the Broncos. Everyone was calling for Tebow, even though Tebow was 3rd string and Brady Quinn was number 2. And Brady Quinn actually got quite upset about saying, I'm the backup quarterback. Yeah, but you're crap, Brady.
What a threesome of quarterback that is. Kyle Orton, Brady Quinn, and Tim Tebow. And they won a playoff game.
Geno Smith, Bryce Petty, Hackenberg.
Wow, good point. Touche.
That makes me puke.
Robert Griffin III, Josh McCown, Cody Kessler.
I mentioned this actually. I spoke with the good chaps of the Woot and Y podcast, and we said that when Robert Griffin was drafted by Washington, they took a quarterback later in the draft called Kirk Cousins, KC. Cleveland have signed Robert Griffin, and they've drafted a quarterback called Cody Kessler, who's CK. Illuminati, as Mr. Woot put it.
Maybe in the upside down part of the world, Australia is, but that doesn't ring anything to me. One of them, Cody Kessler's, I don't think he's going to be an NFL quarterback, and Robert Griffin will probably get injured by week 3. I wish him all the best, but I don't think it's going to happen. And
you don't really wish him all the best, do
you? I do wish him all the best. We'll always have that year done. We'll always have that year. So Dutton, let's get our next guest on as quick as we can. Let's speak to Alex Gellar of NFL Fantasy, producer of the Fantasy Live podcast, and most importantly, Dutton, Liverpool fan, to discuss all things fantasy and his thoughts on the Europa League final.
Okie dokes.
And joining us now, Max and Lyrical. It's our pleasure to have Alex Gellar back on the show. Alex is a fantasy football writer for NFL Fantasy and obviously the producer of Fantasy Live podcast. But most importantly today, Dutton, 24 hours prior to the game, he's a Liverpool fan. So the first question, Dutton, straight into it, is, Alex, how do you think Liverpool are going to get on tomorrow?
Well, I'm going to see what Klopp does with the starting 11, but they've been playing some pretty good football lately, and I'm hoping they come out firing and keep that attack going.
So the follow up is simple, really. I'm from Liverpool, so I support Liverpool. You're not, so why Liverpool Football Club?
Well, when I was younger, I always played soccer growing up, and one of my youth summer teams, we had a coach who used to play for Liverpool back in the early 90s. I think he was a backup keeper. We actually found him on the International Superstar Soccer 98 game for the Nintendo 64, but his name was Chris Odina, and at that point I loved watching the Premier League, but I didn't have anything drawing me to one team or another, so when I played for a guy who used to play for Liverpool briefly, I thought that's where I'll put my allegiance, and I've been there ever since.
That is as good a reason as any.
I mean, I'm going to guess as well, and be polite to Alex, and that Liverpool haven't won the league in his lifetime, probably.
Don't believe so, no.
That makes me sad, a little bit sick, thinking how young Alex is, and I'm more sad that we haven't won the league. Dalton, can we talk about NFL now, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Have you poor Liverpool fans suffered so much through these?
Just get on with it.
Alex, the first question I have, one of my favourite bugbears when it comes to fantasy football is that tight end is a position that usually lets you down. Last year it seemed to be, if you didn't get Gronk, then you're just going to be streaming. But it does seem to me that there are a few more candidates to be a bit more consistent this year. Do you agree with that? And if so, who do you like this year?
Absolutely. Last year you were right. When draft started, it was Gronk or basically, see what you can find at the bottom of the scrap heap. But we've seen a lot more guys emerge into reliable tight end ones in fantasy. They might not have the production of Gronk, but guys like Travis Kelce and Delaney Walker and the waiver wire hero last year, Gary Barnidge, those all became guys that you could rely on week in and week out. And now this year, through free agency, with all of the movement from the tight ends, we have a lot of guys now that are going to be in situations to see the level of opportunity to potentially put up those tight end one numbers. So I think it is certainly a deeper position this year. And a couple guys that I have circled that I would like to draft later in leagues are, of course, Ladarius Green. Antonio Gates' former backup with the Chargers is now in Pittsburgh. And with Martavis Bryant being on a suspension for them, Green's going to have a lot of chances to get a lot of passes in that offense. And Heath Miller was very productive back in that offense working with Ben Roethlisberger, and he was never the athlete that Ladarius Green is. However, if his price climbs too high, I would be happy to look at Dwayne Allen in Indianapolis, who I much preferred of those two tight ends. The reason he was never a big fantasy asset is because both he and Coby Fleener were splitting all the targets and all the work from Andrew Luck. But now that Coby Fleener is in New Orleans, Dwayne Allen could be a really great value for people later in drafts if they pass on one of those elite tight ends at the top, like Rob Gronkowski or Jordan Reed or Greg Olsen, and want to grab somebody later.
I think the thing with Allen that seems to be in his favour is that he's such a good blocker, which is, it's becoming the lost art of tight ends. It's like, I can block. Yeah, we're not interested. But it helps you stay on the field if you can do it. Not that Indianapolis are going to try and run the ball, because let's be silly. Let's be honest here, they're not.
But yeah, no, Allen is an excellent blocker, and like you said, that's going to help him stay on the field. And they don't have a ton of depth immediately behind him right now, so whether it's a one tight end set or they're splitting them out wide, it's going to be Dwayne Allen getting all those looks, and especially in the red zone.
I mean, we are all waiting for the emergence of Jack Doyle, but until then, we'll get by with Dwayne Allen, I think.
Keep waiting, Neil.
Jack Doyle, didn't I go to school with him?
You probably did.
He's
either that, or he was one of the the South Side gang in Chicago in the 30s.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. You beat me there. You both beat me there with your fantasy knowledge. We move on to people names that people have actually heard of, and that's Aaron Rodgers. Are we to assume, Alex, that Aaron Rodgers is still first QB off the board, or if not, who would you be picking first in your fantasy draft?
Well, for me, it is going back to Aaron Rodgers because he's a guy that is throwing out the year where he broke his collarbone and last year where all of his wide receivers got injured. I don't believe he's ever finished lower than second in overall fantasy points among quarterbacks. So his level of consistency and his floor for what he can produce for you is outrageously high. I mean, even last year, he threw like 36 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and people considered that a really bad year for Aaron Rodgers. So he's the guy that I look to that is going to have things in his favor with Jordy Nelson returning to health, Eddie Lacy slimming down, Randall Cobb getting healthier, and Jared Cook coming in too at tight end. Things in his offense are building up for him to bounce back to that truly elite level of passer, whereas Cam Newton, as amazing as he is, he's not going to probably be able to keep up that torrid pace that his offense scored touchdowns on last year, and even a slight regression from that will still keep Cam as an elite fantasy quarterback, but it'll open the door for somebody like Rodgers to usurp him. And it's for that reason I trust the weapons around Rodgers and Rodgers himself as a quarterback that I think he should be the number one off the board.
I mean, one of the points I made out is that, I genuinely wish, this is in Cam Newton's, a mark against Cam Newton in the sense, I wish I loved anyone or anything in this world the way that Ted Ginn loves running out of bounds.
or dropping key passes too. That's another good one.
Yeah, I mean, this is a craft you have to work at. It's almost like when you see like a bad magician, they have to be good to be that bad, and that's what it's like sometimes watching Ted Ginn try and catch the ball.
I was reading something in a drafting, and someone Will Fuller, who was picked by Houston, I think, and someone asked for a comp, and a comp was Ted Ginn, and I was like, oh God, why would you compare him to someone who runs out of bounds and can't catch? Well, that's a first round pick, ladies and gents.
Yes, the comparison is there because Will Fuller, much like Ted Ginn coming out of college, has truly elite deep speed. Like if he can get around somebody, if they don't get their hand on him at the line of scrimmage, he's going to beat them deep. The trouble is Will Fuller had some issues with catches at Notre Dame, and he had some issues with drops as well. So they viewed him as kind of that boomer bust prospect who was a fantastic athlete, but could also come up and when he does hit that home run shot, it's great. But there are other times where he'll leave you wanting.
Speaking of wide receivers, I'll give him some credit here. For once, Mainz actually had a good year in our league of record, going very wide. He didn't win, but
I didn't win. No, I got beaten in the semi-finals, but we won't get it. I'm over it now.
Yeah, he survived the annual calls for his head after week 6 from his angry fan base. He went very wide receiver heavy at the top of his draft. Do you think that's a strategy that probably is going to become more popular going forward?
100%. I think that's going to be a strategy a lot of fantasy analysts in the community are espousing, and because of we like to joke about it around here, we've referred to it as the running back death last year of all the elite running backs getting injured or having issues like Eddie Lacy did. However, I think you can go both ways in the draft. I made this case recently, I think, on the podcast or on Twitter, that there are certainly those wide receivers, that top tier, the Antonio Brown, the Julio Jones, the Odell Beckham, and DeAndre Hopkins. Those are the guys that you'd think about taking in the first round and could base your team around. However, there are still plenty of good elite running backs that their tier is so much smaller, though, and once you get outside of that, there are just endless questions at running back. I think I might be, it's a little early in the process, but I might be leaning towards zigging when everybody else is zagging and going back to taking running backs early because in my opinion, that second tier of wide receivers immediately after those elite guys is so much bigger and deeper and more consistent than that second tier of running backs. I would rather get a couple of those elite fantasy producers at running back, take my chances there, and then load up on mid-tier wide receivers after.
I mean, I know. Sorry, I'm just. I play a few leagues that almost to try and answer the current demand is that the standard position is there's only one running back and another flex position. So if you can look into getting taking a good running back first, and maybe get I'll say for like Matt Forte or someone later. Obviously, you're still getting the value, but I see what you're saying is that the middle class, as it were, of wide receiver is a lot better than the middle class of running back. That's basically what you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, and if you look at it, like say you're picking at the back end of the first round, and you take somebody like Lamar Miller is there. Maybe those top guys go and the top wide receivers go. So you pick up Lamar Miller, you can come back around. You're going to have your option of a wide receiver probably along the lines of Allen Robinson, A.J. Green, Jordy Nelson, and then coming back around again, you can catch a few more wide receivers. Or if you double up on running back, then there should be a guy like Doug Baldwin could be there, or some of these other very talented number one wide receivers that might not be way up there, but are still going to produce at a good level.
So, I mean, last year I think it was draft position dependent. So I was like the bottom of a snake draft. So I managed to get Julio and Antonio Brown and Julio, and then last year in the fourth round I got DeAndre Hopkins. So I just kind of nailed it on those. However, on the running backs, I really struggled, and it's one of the reasons that I didn't win the league. And I managed to draft what we describe on here as Fat Eddie Lacy. This year, Dutton and other eminent writers, the way Dutton's put himself, Dutton wrote these questions, as you can tell, because he's put himself in high class, seem to think that Eddie Lacy is set for a rebound season because he's now thin Eddie Lacy, or thinner Eddie Lacy, as he's still a rather big gentleman. How does Alex Gellar fancy writers see Eddie Lacy? And then more importantly, how does Alex Gellar Packers fans see Eddie Lacy this year?
Well, they're kind of one and the same here, because fantasy analyst and Packer fan both know how good of a player Eddie Lacy is when he's in shape. He was one of the 5 or 6 best running backs in the league his first 2 years out there. And when his weight and discipline got away from him, that's when everything fell apart. So, honestly, we've seen what Eddie Lacy can do in that Packers offense. He finished as the 6th highest scoring running back in each of his first 2 years in standard scoring leagues. So if Eddie Lacy's coming in an offense that's gotten healthier and he's trimmer and quicker and stronger, I think he's going to be back to being one of the top 10 scoring running backs in the league. And he's going to be a bit of a value, but I think his price is going to continue to rise throughout the year, and you're probably going to have to spend at least a second-round pick if you want Eddie Lacy this fall.
I think it was the great was it Fat O'Donovan of the Baltimore Colts who said that he was a light eater. As soon as it was light, he was eaten, and you're just worried that may have affected Eddie Lacy at some point last season.
Yeah, it certainly could have. I mean, he lives in the Green Bay area where there is lots of delicious beer and cheese and deep fried food. So I can understand if it's those winter months, trying to pack on the pounds to keep out the cold.
It seems like a regular thing in Alabama, because I know Trent Richardson, prior to his workout with the Ravens, decided that he wanted to eat like enough chicken to sink a small ship.
If we weren't supposed to eat chicken, it wouldn't have been made so delicious.
That's true. I agree with Neil.
Yeah. My last question for you, Alex. Obviously, very, very grateful for your time. Is there a late round player, could be any position, wide receiver, running back, tight end, that you want on as many of your rosters in redraft as possible?
I've been thinking about this a lot more because as I've done more podcasts, people have been asking me this and other things. One player I certainly have. I'll give you 2 players, 2 running backs I have circled that I think a lot of people have soured on. Were both rookies last year, and those are Duke Johnson and Amir Abdullah. Duke Johnson, because as a rookie he caught 60 passes in Cleveland when their offense was terrible. And now that Hugh Jackson is there, he's had a top 10 rushing offense in terms of attempts for basically his last 4 or 5 years as a coordinator. So I think that team is going to recommit to running the ball. He already likes what he's seen out of those two. And Duke Johnson's ability, both in the passing game and between the tackles, could set him up for a sneakily good season as, an 8th or 9th round value. And then Amir Abdullah, I was a big fan of him coming out of Nebraska. Very disappointed how his season went last year. I still believe in his talent, and I think that the Lions have done enough on the line. They just drafted a first-round guy in Taylor Decker. They're trying to rebuild that offensive line, and the way the offense took off during the second half of the season when Jim Bob Cooter was the offensive coordinator, I think it could set up for Amir Abdullah to have a surprisingly productive sophomore season as well.
I think as well, I'm actually doing research for an article I'm writing for about Detroit. The difference in the rushing emphasis placed with the Lions when Jim Bob took over, I think they averaged another 30 rushing yards a game and about another 6 or 7 attempts.
Yeah,
so
I was doing a similar research. I think you're right on with those numbers there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just even little things like that. If Amir can come on and, similar to Matt Jones, to the extent he has the occasional ball security issue, it's going to be a productive offense. And with Hall of Fame receivers just, retire, there's going to be plenty of balls to go around as well. So obviously, Theo Riddick is going to be in a factor. He's a good receiver, but Abdullah's no slouch in the receiving game either.
Yeah, no, he's got great hands and he's got great ability after the catch. So I like his upside, especially with Joique Bell out of the way. And the team kind of hinting that they're going to move Theo Riddick to more of a slot wide receiver should leave more of the standard backfield work to Abdullah. Hopefully, we will see though.
Well, Alex, thanks a lot for your time. We'll let you get back to Los Angeles.
Of course.
I for one hope you have an excellent tomorrow that is punctuated
Same as well.
Of your day with a Liverpool victory.
Yes, I just looked to double check, and actually their last league title was when I was approximately 1 year old. So,
There we go.
But otherwise,
still ridiculously young.
That's outrageous. That is outrageously young, Alex, and I'm stunned into silence on it.
Let me double check to make sure I didn't miss one in there. But nope, that was it. The 89-90 year. Yeah. I was born in 88, so I would have been born after they won the title in that 87-88 year. So can't count that one.
No.
What a team that was.
But
we could
talk
about that forever.
I don't want
to. Fingers crossed for tomorrow. I will be watching, and I hope you will be as well.
Absolutely. Well,
and,
cheers, Alex.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Well done. That was a brilliant Alex Gellar there, who mind-blowingly was basically nearly born in the 90s and is working for NFL. My head, him and Matt Harmon make me angry.
Bloody millennials.
Done. That's been the show. Spoke to Fran Duffy, talked to NFC, spoke to Alex Gellar, talked about Fat Eddie Lacy, talked about whether you should zig or zag in your fantasy draft. I am now going to go to sleep, because the sooner I go to sleep, the sooner it's Europa League final day. Dutton just shrugged his shoulders. He's waiting for Sheffield Wednesday versus Hull, which has just been announced. Wembley, a week's time, but we will talk about that next week. This is the match.